This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. All right, so one of the things we've been talking about is the level of excitement that we've had for this team and the level of expectation that we have for this team to be basically as good, if not better, than the team in 2020 that won 11 games and the playoff game. So what I wanted to do was go back and look at that 2020 roster and ask ourselves the question, hey, is this team on paper better than the team in 2020? You know, if we're going to have expectations of being better than the Browns were in 2020, we have to make sure that's a realistic expectation to set. So let's look at the roster, all parts of it, and see, is this team, on paper at least, a better football team than what we had in 2020? Let's start out. The first comparison is obviously the quarterback position. In 2020, the quarterback was Baker Mayfield, who came in with the 85 Pro Football Focus grade. I believe that would be the highest grade of his career, was that season. He had his best season, his highest graded season, and he was pretty good for that team. 26 touchdowns, I believe, 10 or 11 interceptions. A pretty good year there for Baker Mayfield. I'm trying to get the stats up. Here we go. Yep. So a pretty good year here for Baker Mayfield, and that was his highest graded year by far, right? By far. So that's Baker Mayfield. We look at Deshaun Watson. We think Deshaun Watson's an upgrade at the quarterback position. Has had 1 year in that 92 range. Baker never reached that 90 range. So if he returns to form to 2020, it's a clear upgrade from what the Browns had at quarterback in 2020. So yes, I think you can make the argument that this team should be better at quarterback than they were at 2020. And that's just if we're looking at the raw Pro Football Focus grades. If we want to have a more in-depth conversation about capability at the position, I think you can make an argument there. Let's look at wide receiver. The Browns have a ton of wide receivers on their roster right now, but the main principal characters that matter: Elijah Moore, Marquise Goodwin, David Bell, Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones. And then you look at the 2020 team, and we're going to see some returning names on this list here. Donovan Peoples-Jones, Derek Willis was still on the team, huh? But Kaderil Hodge got a significant amount of targets. And Taywan Taylor, Marvin Hall, Rashard Higgins. Going back, Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry, and I think Amari Cooper clears both of these guys. Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham that year. Remember, Odell got hurt. He didn't play most of that year too as well. I would say you're probably going to get an equivalent of what you got out of the Rashard Higgins, Odell Beckham mix from Donovan Peoples-Jones. And then you have an added element here that you did not have in 2020 in Elijah Moore and in Marquise Goodwin. I would say the wide receiving room is a little bit more dynamic. It's deeper. I think it's better than the 2020 wide receivers that you had. Tight end, you look at Steven Carlson, Harrison Bryant, David Njoku in that 2020 team. You have a better version of David Njoku. You have Jordan Atkins, and then you have Harrison Bryant. I think that's an upgrade. So I think you have upgraded from that 2020 tight end room. And now let's look at offensive line. In 2020, you had Jed Wills. You had Jack Conklin. You had at center, it was still, I forgot it, J.C. Treader, and then Wyatt Teller and Joe Bitonio. This is basically the same offensive line that you're bringing back. I would say Conklin's got a little bit worse. Wills has stagnated, and I think that's frustrated people, but Wills has stagnated. And I think Wyatt Teller is a little bit worse, but I will say you have more depth. I'm going to say here that the offensive line in 2020 is going to be better than what they were or are going to be this year. So that's the first notch. So I guess we'll mark this out, right? I got quarterback and wide receiver. It's 1, 2. And then we have offensive line. That goes to 2020 only because, not because the Browns have a bad offensive line this year. They have some good depth, and James Hudson and DeJuan Jones. Like, they're deeper than they were in 2020. But they were really deep in 2020, and they were one of the best offensive lines of all time in 2020. Like, you look at the stuff that they did on that offensive line, how they were able to dominate games in that offensive line. It was crazy. Now, the Browns aren't going to be asked to play the same through that offensive line this year than they were in 2020. That's also going to affect their grades. But I think when it's all said and done, we're going to think that this offensive line, this is going to be peak of this era of the core of the Browns offensive line. Hope to be wrong on that, but I think 2020 is as good as it gets from this offensive line. And that's a pretty high bar, to be honest with you, because that was an incredible year of offensive line play. Another area where I would give the edge to the 2020 team is at running back. I think the running back room's deeper. Now, again, how this team is asked to win has changed over the years, especially with Deshaun Watson, right? With Deshaun Watson, yes, you have a good offensive line, but you don't have the greatest offensive line of all time. That's fine. And with Deshaun Watson, you have a much more explosive and dynamic wide receiving room. With Baker Mayfield, you didn't, because this team was built to win through the run game, which is why you had a very deep running back room. You were like 3 deep here. I think that the running back room in 2020 is clearly better. You get a better version of Kareem Hunt. You get a still good version of Kareem Hunt. And then Nick Chubb was in rare form. And well, not even in rare form. Nick Chubb was Nick Chubb. So we look at it here. Tight ends, wide receivers, quarterbacks, I would say have been our upgrades from the 2020 year. And I would say slight downgrade at running back and downgrade at offensive line. So that's the look at the offense. Now, as much as it's as important as it is to be good at the offensive line, the Browns aren't bad at offensive line. But that has not gotten better. But that's only because the bar was so high. Quarterback's interesting because that changes a lot of dynamics about how you do everything on the field. If Deshaun Watson is in that 90 range, then this offense will be better than they were in 2020. Point blank, period. It don't matter if the offensive line is better. It don't matter if the running back, they'll be better. If he puts up 2020 numbers, they will be much better than they were in 2020 on offense. If he puts up 2019, 2018 numbers, they will be just as good, if not a little better, and probably be the same range of team that they were in 2020. Again, a lot of your ceiling rides on Deshaun Watson's ability to be elite, and we'll see what that is. Now, that's on the offensive side. I would say that the Browns offense has gotten better because, yes, the offensive line is worse than it was in 2020. You still have Joe Bitonio. You still have all the principal players. It's just, it's not going to jail like that again. So it's not like you've downgraded our offensive line, right? It's not like any player on that offensive line has degraded so awfully that you can't play them anymore, that they're not remotely close to themselves. So even though that's a downgrade, it's kind of a moot point, right? Running back. Yes, you are not as deep as you were in 2020, but you're also not going to be asked to run the ball as much as you did in 2020. So, and Nick Chubb's still there. So yes, slight downgrades at those positions when it comes to depth and just gel ability and the reliability of those positions, but still have all the principal players. I would say clear upgrade. All right, defensively, is this team an upgrade from the 2020 team? I think we forget how bad this defense was, or at least how much talent lacked on this defense in 2020. All right, let's start with the safeties. In 2020, the Browns rolled out Sheldrick Redwine. Y'all remember him? Ronnie Harrison, Javonte Moffett was there for a play. I remember. Carl Joseph, and everybody's favorite Andrew Sadejo. Y'all used to rip that man a new one. I used to feel bad for Andrew Sadejo the way y'all would do him, man. Y'all used to do him so nasty in them comments. I remember some of y'all hiding your head right now. Oh, that wasn't me. That was you. That was 100% you that was doing that. back in 2020. And yes, you should be ashamed of yourself. All right. So yeah, the safety room was a mess. You have Ronnie McLeod, who played a lot of snaps last year, put in an 80 Pro Football Focus grade. Juan Thornhill played a lot of snaps on the championship team, 72 Pro Football Focus grade. And then you have Grant Delpit, DeAnthony Bell, AJ Green. Yes, this is an upgrade. This is not just an upgrade. This is our first big upgrade because this safety room much better than the 2021. So boom, there. Cornerbacks. The Browns have Greg Newsome, Denzel Ward, Martin Emerson, Thomas Graham, Mike Ford, Cameron Mitchell, fifth round pick, my bad. Fifth round pick in this year's draft. In 2020, they were rolling out at cornerback Tavare Thomas, a rookie AJ Green, Denzel Ward, who had a good year that year, MJ Stewart, Robert Jackson, Kevin Johnson, and Terrence Mitchell. I don't know, y'all. Y'all tell me, do you think Terrence Mitchell and Denzel Ward, do you think that's an upgrade from having Denzel Ward, or do you think the Browns have upgraded from having Denzel Ward and Terrence Mitchell to having what now? Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson, and Denzel Ward? I would say that's a big upgrade. Secondary has had massive steps over the last few years. Big upgrades at that side, right? So on paper, much better in the secondary. I would say clearly better in the secondary than the 2020 team. Let's look at linebacker. The 2020 team had Jacob Phillips, Mac Wilson, Tay Davis, Sione Takitaki, who had a decent year, Elijah Lee, and BJ Goodson, who also had a good year, and Malcolm Smith. This linebacking room, underrated. I will say this. In 2020, they were underrated because I thought Sione Takitaki, in combination with Jacob Phillips, put in some good work in 2020. And I also felt like Malcolm Smith and BJ Goodson put in some good work that year. But that was the room there for the Browns in 2020. Let's look at the 2021 room. They have Awalk, who I would say is an upgrade from BJ Goodson. Sione Takitaki, about the same as he was in 2020. JOK is the one that's going to change things, right? Is he going to be the massive upgrade over Malcolm Smith? I think he is just about as good as Malcolm Smith at the bare minimum. He could be better than Malcolm Smith. I mean, a game changer if he really wanted to. So you compare those three to the main three that played last year or in 2020, I would say this is a push. It hinges on JOK. If JOK is much better, if he's closer to what he was the year before, okay, now this is a clear upgrade. But right now, this is a push at linebacker. Let's look at the interior of the defensive line, and this might be 2020's first win. Let's see what we had going here. A rookie Jordan Elliott, Vincent Taylor, Larry Ogunjobi, Sheldon Richardson. Sheldon Richardson wasn't no joke at that point in time. He was still pretty good. And Larry Ogunjobi, we had our frustrations with him as a run defender, but we knew he had a NFL service to offer us, right? That has not always been the case at defensive line for this team. This year, they're pushing out Dalvin Tomlinson. I would say that's about equivalent to what Sheldon Richardson was at the time. Tristan Hill, irrelevant in this conversation. Perion Winfrey, we'll see. He's kind of equivalent to what Jordan Elliott was at that time. Jordan Elliott, he's kind of worse. Roderick Perry, Tommy Togiai, and then Maurice Hurst could be, I would say the 2020 room was better because you had more sure things in that interior room. It's nice to have Dalvin Tomlinson, but that year you had Dalvin Tomlinson and Larry Ogunjobi. We weren't having debates about who was starting. This year we're going to be having debates about who was starting. The 2020 had a better defensive line room than this year's room. Now, if Perion Winfrey steps up, that changes. If Jordan Elliott steps up, that changes. If Maurice Hurst steps up, that changes. But until one of those things happen, I cannot say that they happen, so they have not. Let's look at edge, and this is another interesting area of the team. Edge rusher. They had Porter Gustin. Y'all remember Porter Gustin? I forgot all about Porter Gustin. It ain't even like it was that long ago. Porter Gustin, Joe Jackson, Myles Garrett, Olivier Vernon, who was good that year. Olivier was pretty good. I believe he had did Olivier have 9 sacks? Olivier had 9 sacks. And Adrian Claiborne, who wasn't awful, but he wasn't like great in that role. But you had Adrian Claiborne, Olivier Vernon, and Myles Garrett, and then Porter Gustin and Joe Jackson switched off and being in the rotation there. It was a solid edge rush rotation. It wasn't the worst one that we've had. This year, Zadarius Smith, which is an upgrade, I would say, from Olivier Vernon. Zadarius Smith clocked in with the 83 Pro Football Focus grade and then 10 sacks last year. What did Olivier Vernon have? A 74 grade and 9. So I would say it's an upgrade over Olivier Vernon. And then Myles Garrett, I think he's gotten better than he was in 2020 over the years. Then you have to ask yourself, hey, do you like Ogabonia? Okonkwo? I will learn his name one day. Or Adrian Claiborne, I would say I would like to go Ogabonia over him. So upgrade. Not a clear upgrade, but I would say slight upgrade at the edge room from the 2021. So you have better pass rushers. Your defensive interior could be better. But hopefully they add one more name or somebody steps up, and then you have a better defensive line. Linebacker, I would say that's a push. Safety, corner, clear upgrade. I can't see how you can argue that the Browns secondary this year is much better than 2020's. I don't know how you can make that argument. If you can, and like you actually believe in it, don't try to devil's advocate. I hate devil's advocate, but don't try to devil's advocate me. But like if you actually believe that the 2020 secondary looks better on paper than this one, like truly make that argument, because I'm fascinated to see how that would even work. And then on offensive side of the ball, I would say offensive line was better in 2020. Running back room was better in 2020. I will say wide receivers are better this year. Quarterback, I would say you can definitely make the argument better than in 2020. And in tight ends, you can make the argument better in 2020. So in all but four positions, you're better. Of those 4 positions, 2 of those upgrades are minuscule because you have the same principal players in place. You just aren't going to get that peak level of performance out of them, but you're still going to get something really good. Linebacker is a push that can easily go over the top, and defensive line is the only one where I'm like, hey, that might not end up being better than defensive interior is the one where I'm like, hey, that might not end up being better than it was in 2020. But everything else, I think will. So is this team on paper better than the 2020 team? And is that something that we could say about 2021 and 2022? Like these last 2 years? I don't think so, because the upgrade at quarterback, we were hoping that Baker would be better in 2021 than he was in 2022, but he ended up being much worse. 2022, you couldn't make the argument that the quarterback play was going to get better than it was in 2020 because of the weird situation that we had going on. This is the first year since 2020 we can make the argument that the quarterback upgrade is going to be better than 2020. Like, pure point blank period. We can make that argument. We weren't making that. I said Jacoby Brissett would be good. I never said Jacoby Brissett would be better than Baker Mayfield was in 2020. Right? Baker did put not a high bar up, but like that year in 2020 was actually good. People try to act like it wasn't actually good. It was actually good, but he never replicated that. So if you have to upgrade at quarterback, and running back and offensive line have relatively stayed the same, and you're upgrading in every other area of the team, yes, this is a better team. For the first time since 2020, I could say on paper, you can make the legitimate argument that this is a better team than the 2021. Will the results be better than 2020? I don't know. The season obviously has to play out for us to know. But what we do know is that the quarterback's situation should be a better situation than it was in 2020. That the wide receiver situation should be a deeper and better situation than it was in 2020. That the tight ends are better than they were in 2020. Offensive line is the same group. Running backs, you still got Nick Chubb, so there's not really much to worry about there. I would even say you can make the argument that you upgraded at kicker and punter. Nobody cares, but you have. But there's that too. I mean, like Austin Seibert did cost you a game in this season. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember in 2020 he stunk. So hopefully K. York don't do the same thing. Stop drafting kickers. But defensively, you can make the argument, hey, this secondary clearly better than what they were in 2020. And they've been that for a while, but they clearly better, clearly more talented. You can even add in the upgrade of Jim Schwartz on the defensive side of the ball. You got a better defensive coordinator, all of that, better special teams coordinator, all that, add in all of those things. So better secondary. Linebackers push, but JOK kind of flips the needle on that. Same thing with interior, right? We're waiting for somebody to step up. Maurice Hurst, Jordan Elliott, Perion Winfrey, all going to get the opportunity to step up there. And you can make the argument that edge rushers gotten better. So if I'm looking at that and I'm trying to be as fair as possible, how can I say that this is not a better team on paper than 2020? Will they achieve more? I don't know. But on paper, they are a better team than they were in 2020. We will see what happens on the football field. But if you're excited, you're justified in your excitement, because no sane person is going to look at this roster compared to the 2020 roster and say 2020 roster was better. No sane person, right? No person that is even attempting to be fair would say that. So yes, this team, this roster should be better, or at least just as good as they were in 2020 record-wise. Like 10 to 11, I would say 10 to 12 wins should be the range that this team aims for, because they are definitely talented enough to do that. Now, are they going to get the same breaks that they got in 2020? I don't know. All those things matter. But talent-wise, this is a good football team. And if we compare it to the only other good football team we've seen in recent memory, they're better. We'll see, though. We'll see. That's my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have a good day.